What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Logic Bomb Podcast, episode 32. And we've got a banger here for you. A repeat guest from the Rainbow Six Siege development team. Matt Lacombe is joining us. He is a game designer that focuses primarily on weapon balance. And, with Operation Shadow Legacy, we had a lot of changes as far as the new optics and stuff. So really, we're going to focus on that in this episode and picking his brain because he was, I think it's fair to say maybe, one of the key players in the optic changes. So the majority of this episode is going to focus on that. We're going to be able to draw some stats as far as, what's this operator's pick rate before these changes and after, how has it affected this weapon choice compared to this one. So I'm really excited to get into this. Again, he joined us back in episode 13. It was one of our most popular episodes. So Matt, thanks for coming back on. I guess first of all, how are you doing? And who forced you to join us again? Because I understand falling for this once, but doing it again, you must be a glutton for punishment.
Thank you for having me back. I'm super excited to discuss with you. It was super fun last time around. I think it started with Alex. He poked me on Twitter. We were discussing about the recall changes and rumors about that was going rampant with the release of Shadow Legacy. And at some point, he just bluntly say, "Well, come on a podcast. We'll just debunk it." Just from there, we just went on, and here we are.
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly what happened. I was getting a lot of questions about recall, and that happens every season. So we kind of know it's coming. But there was a statement about recall being different in T-Hunt compared to live build. Not between live build and test server, just we hear that as well every time, but it's specifically between T-Hunt and a game of rank. And to me, that sounds unlikely and also not something that I felt like I could replicate. So if I jumped in and actually looked at a recording of recall and emptying 3 max at a wall in a rank game or in a T-Hunt, they were the same. But I will say that it feels a little easier in T-Hunt. I don't know if that's maybe just because there's less pressure or you're going in there with the mindset of focusing on your recall. And the bots that shoot back in T-Hunt are not as dangerous as the ones in rank, right?
Totally.
So,
there's no difference. I don't have a secret data that is Hero Hunt or Training Grounds. We have this kind of values, and on PvP we have those kinds of values. It doesn't exist. It's just it's straight up. I have recall data for PC and on console. That's all I have. I do have some values that are tweakable for Training Grounds only. As you know, you have more ammo and stuff like that. So that's the only difference we can have. After that, why does it feel so different? Well, you're most likely playing in a solo lone wolf session, which means you're most likely on one ping, which will feel natural, will feel more better for sure. After that, you don't have to look out for bullet holes. You don't have to look for some weird angle or whatever. The guys, they always come at the same pacing. They don't lean, they don't move. So you only have to keep one position in mind. You won't surprisingly go crouch or drop shot or go prone. So it's way easier to control and think about where my where I place my aim. So I feel like there's a lot of things that makes you feel better, and you feel like you control everything. You will one tap all of those guys, and after that you try to replicate that in PvP. And the guy leans to the left when you shoot him. He goes crouch, he goes prone or whatever. So yeah, everything will look easier on Training Ground, but it's the same data. It's the same data set.
Well, I think I'm sorry. Go ahead.
There was one argument that was brought, a lot as a proving ground for this, and it was the rate of fire cap on DMRs, and that was something that was, it was a bug. To be honest, it took a while to get, but it was most likely just a bug, and the cap was overridden in PvE and not in PvP. So it's most likely it's only a bug. It doesn't change anything, or usually it's not supposed to be overridden. So same data, only you get more ammo, simply.
I think the first thing we need to do before we go any deeper here, can we see that coffee mug again? Oh, there! Look at that! It's a beautiful coffee mug. My goodness.
Hey, I almost poured coffee on myself looking at mine as well.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be kind of frustrating for you to see kind of every test server. There's like conspiracy theories about the recoil changes and stuff. I've been part of it, and I think one of the things that's messed me up before is that, it's not like in Siege where you spray a gun and you get the exact same recoil every single time. So you can do 10 sprays against a wall on the live build versus the test server, and they will look somewhat different. You know what I mean? Like, they're not going to match up mirror. And if you look at it long enough, this has happened to me, you can start to see, hey, there's a little bit more of a gap there. And so I think, a couple ways I would explain this for me as a player is, one, are your settings actually the same from the test server to the live build? Is it possible that you have one sensitivity off, or are your attachments the same as you go from one operator to the next? Is it possible you have muzzle on the live build versus compensator on the test server? The other thing I would say regarding your training grounds talk there, I have a really bad habit of like squeezing my mouth death grip style, and it's like so bad that like some mouses I like my thumb will slip and hit like my gadget, side mouse button and stuff like that. So the thing about it is that never happens in T-Hunt because I'm never worked up. I'm never like amped up. I'm never nervous. So to think that doesn't happen, I know that my aim is different in training grounds versus a live game session. So it very well could be from something like that for a lot of players out there. I think that's a great possibility.
I know that there was sometimes where the save file was different from the test server from the live build. So if you reduce your sensitivity of 10 between the last test server and your current live build, obviously if you don't go look for those, these will change. The attachments will be different because they are on the save files. So those are all possibilities. You have to keep in mind that you know it. I mean, you played on the test server. It's not sweaty. It's like everyone is having fun. Everyone is playing a bit like let's open this window and jump out. And so it's not the same kind of tension as you would normally play on the live build with on the live servers. So I'm pretty sure this mindset has to do with this too. Like if you compare PvE to PvP, well, in PvE everything is like it's always the same. There's no variations. In PvP, you will almost never take the same firefight. I mean, you could be at the same all the way, same characters, but did one take a bullet to the knee first? You don't know if that bullet's going to do 30 damage, 40 damage because of the drop of distance. So there's a lot of variables when you do the firefights in the Siege, and it's a lot of complicated stuff going on underneath, like limb penetration, stuff like that. So it makes it so every gunfight is different. You will never encounter the same firefight in the same settings unless you peek, like a window. But then again, did you hit him in the shoulder and after that you will take a fight against him and you down him in one bullet and you're like, oh wow, this gun is so good. But so yeah, there's a lot of variations and stuff that will happen, and it sometimes feels harder in that sense that since it's not the same thing that's happening over and over again, sometimes you doubt yourself. You're like, oh, did it happen? So there's a lot of volatile pieces going on here. So, but one thing that is super important about recoil changes on TS, I really love changing recoil. I love messing with those, and I'll be like the first one going to care and com teams be like, can you mention this? I really want feedback on this, and I would be really happy to do so. So I'll try to announce it. I will make sure to gather some, like it's my favorite part of my job. So I'll try to make sure that everyone knows it and can provide some feedback. So you shouldn't start looking for recoil changes just because there's like, no, I'll come up with balloons and whistle. I'll be super happy about it.
Yeah, I was gonna say that if an attachment got changed or a recall actually got reworked. So you mentioned, we can refer back to the other episode you were on about, where console has like 30% less recall, how the diamond works, and how the whole recall thing is. I would assume if you go in and like, let's say you rework the recall on the C8, that's something you want everyone to know, because you really want them to notice and get feedback on it. I don't think as many shadow changes happen to recall as we might sometimes think as players, even though it can feel very, very different. I know that when Vulcan was introduced, me jumping on and playing with almost 100 more frames made everything seem completely different. But it made sense, like the movement felt different, just because of the... But like spraying 5 or 10 times at a wall and then trying to look at the screenshots there compared to the 5 or 10 times on the wall on another build, there's way too many variabilities of where those bullets can land. Like the SMG-12, I tried that today, right, on the wall. Not one of them even looked remotely close to each other.
I thought you were going to say not one of them hit the wall.
That's honestly true as well. Yeah, no, that's another one. Yeah. What? Actually, let's detour into that real quick.
Okay.
So some of the guns have extremely crazy, surely for balance. We've seen what happened when Ella didn't have a lot of recall and 50 bullets, and that was scary. Where's like the middle ground for it not being too much to handle? Or is it more that you want to force people to maybe tap fire with them, and it's instead of taking away, I don't know, full auto capability from that thing, you can just make the recall so difficult that it's not really happening? Because it's dangerous as well. If I spray and hit a lucky headshot off it, that feels great on my end, but it feels really bad on the other guy's end. Whereas things that are controllable, like the C8, for example, has a ton of recall, but you can get good with it if you really practice. I feel like the SMG-12 is a little different.
Yeah, the bearing, the SMG-12s are two secondary weapons that, like before the recall changed, like was middle of year 3, if I remember correctly. Those weapons were dominating. I mean, they were like the primary weapons, and barely cared about the primary. So the change is still that one that is active. It was a reaction toward changing this mentality of having the secondary and the primary. Is it something that I really, really enjoy? I mean, I did try, I think it was last year almost, for the, I don't remember, with the Scorpion, like the change with the multiple stage recall and stuff like that. That is an approach that I think is more interesting to me. Making sure that you have a 40 bullet magazine so you can actually spend more time without reloading, but the 11 first bullets are the only one that are actually going to land where you're aiming at. So there's some, trigger discipline, and like you need some skill to use the weapon. It's not an easy weapon, but I think that's more something I would like to see. So yeah, the SMG-12 and the bearing, they still have better data than your average pistol. So if you go ahead and think about the KD and everything, they still have a positive impact in their stats and everything. But yeah, random recoil left, right like that, it's not something. I think everyone has an opinion on that, and it's pretty clear it's not working. It's something that we will need to look forward.
Matt,
Okay.
did you know that if you run iron sights on the bearing, it reduces the recoil by 50%? You weren't aware of that, were you?
That was one that was popular, I think, a couple of months ago, right? I remember seeing that. No, it doesn't change anything. It can change the impression, like the animation and everything that moves in front of you. That will affect your perception of how it's handled, but doesn't change where the bullet will land.
Well, I want to get into the sights. Or did you have something else on that?
Actually, this can segue into the sites. I just wanted to mention all the way back. I remember I sent you a video of a comp game, and you got reminded of something that scared you. The sight distance on the old guns. So all the way back when recall didn't hit where the crosshair was, it wouldn't always follow. There was a little offset that got fixed. But the sights had different distances as well. So depending on what gun you were using, your sight would be a different distance away from your screen. So I guess that can segue into all the new sight changes and how that first off isn't a thing anymore. And we have, how many sights do we have now?
In total, I think we have 15, if we don't count like the unique cases, but at least 15 that are, generic. But yes, that actually played a part into what we have in today's sight and scope. Because, like you mentioned before, you had different size of reticle because it was closer to the screen, was further from the point of view. So you had to learn every weapon and their sights, which was like, it's really a lot to ask the player. So you have to find someone that has a similar position because it was not at the same place. The bone for the scope was not the same place on the weapon. It's something that changed along the way. Like you mentioned, if we play even before Shadow Legacy and stuff like that, it's always the same position. The reticle is always the same size. But with the new sights and the new scopes, we had to make sure that they were using all the same bone because we want to have the same thing with everyone. So we had cases on the test server where people were just like, oh, well, those guys are lazy. What are they doing? But we had like the 2X was floating was floating on the AK-74 from Nomad, just because it's a generic bone. And we have to use the same thing. It's a system. If we want to change the position of each of those scopes and bone depending on the weapon, on whatever you chose, it's hard for us to debug, and it's more information for the player to actually learn all those positions because, this one will take 30% of the screen, 35, blah, blah, blah. So that's why we have some razors, we have some tools to make sure that it's always the same position. It might look weird when you look at the model in 3D, but it's to ensure that the first person perspective is good. And obviously for us, it's easier to debug because if we have to have a matrix of, okay, well, this bone has to be at minus 6x and minus blah, blah, blah. So yeah, it's not sustainable. So it's something that played an impact in what we have now with the Shadow Legacy.
When you say bone, you mean that's the locking mechanism right where it is compared to the gun, right?
Yes, sorry, I used the term from the modeling, but yes, we place an object on the weapon, and the scope will spawn on that spot.
Okay.
So it's always the same one.
And the riser is the thing that you added in to offset the 1.5, so we don't look into the iron sights anymore.
That's exactly. That's one of the reason, and because that bone was so far, sometime close to the end of the weapon, sometimes it was floating and stuff like that. We had it that razor had Picatinny rail, so it doesn't float.
If you wouldn't mind, can you kind of like take us back to the beginning of the optic changes? I guess how long has it been in the works? How did that conversation start? And I guess why? What were you hoping to accomplish? Like, what was, we've had the same sites in the game for how long? Why now? What made you want to do this?
It's something I really wanted for a while, to be honest. Like I joined the design team around Burnt Horizon, Year 4 Season 1. And it was something I wanted to do at that point. I knew it as soon as I started. I was like, we need some more optics. We have like the ACOG that is dominating everything. So at that point, I was already trying to figure out where and how we can do it. It took a while to get some traction, and since it was not like something, it doesn't fall like in a cell, like the operators, the playlist, and stuff like that. So it was a bit harder for that to get some traction. And when my good colleague Gaëlle Robert, if you see her on you play, it's the Raclette. She was working on SAM, Zero. And she said, well, that SC3000 would look really good with new sights. And it kind of like started there, and we went from there. And actually, we wanted more options, and that's how we got it there. It's just like it got winged by someone, and we delivered the project.
I get all the new sites that were added. My one question is, why change the ACOG to actually be 2.5 instead of 3 that it was before? Because to me, that just seems like you're so used to it and we still get to keep it, and you do add a 3 times in, but it's just a different one. Was that just to like have it fit with the name of it, or was it enough?
It was going to be awkward anyway, because like everyone saw that the description was 2.5, the in-game was 3.0. Before that, it wasn't like too complicated because there was like no other comparison point. So even if we went ahead and say, okay, it stays at 3.0, but we change the description, people would be confused with like, oh, they changed the ACOG, what happened? And either way, it was going to be awkward. So it came up because I had the 1.5 and the 2.0 in the pipe. Everything was going pretty well with them. And you could see that people were starting to move away from the ACOG just because it was, like too zoomed, and people were using mostly Olo and were swapping to Olo. So it kind of like rang a bit and be like, well, maybe there's something wrong with the ACOG. So not more than that, because obviously it was still the king and everything. Everyone wanted to play the ACOG. But then after that, I came up with the scope 3.0. I was like, well, this scope is going to be good for DMRs and stuff like that. But people already had issues playing with the ACOG in close range. So if I was going to put the scope at 3.5, was it going to be even worse than the 3.0? And after that, I did a test where I put it on 2.5, and it was like, yeah, well, it felt more natural. We just went with it, and after that, it felt like it would help people that felt that it was too zoomed in, and it felt more natural as you played it. So that's how it got there.
It actually didn't take long to get used to. I remember loading Sledge on test server and then looking through it, and everything looked so small, but now I don't notice it at all anymore. The 1.5 saw a little reticle change as well. It got slimmed down quite a lot from what we initially saw. And I don't know if the stats back this up, but that has to be one of the best performing sites.
It's the one that has the most impact on the stats, for sure.
Okay. Yeah. Because damn, that feels like it's the perfect mix between Holo and ACOG. It's good for every situation. You can hold tight angles, you can still peek with it, and you don't feel like locked down if you get in too much of a close fight.
If we go back to the question before where you asked when I started to work on that, I did some, has to be like at least 8 or 7 months ago, at least. I don't remember exactly the timeline, but I was doing, like the distribution and be like, okay, this one is going to have this one that. And my first draw was, well, the 2.5 is still going to be the best option. So we're going to balance around the fact that the more zoom you have, the best it's going to be. And the more we actually started to play with the models and stuff like that, we were like, hey, maybe that's not true. Maybe it's actually the 1.5 that is the strongest one. And I still hold true to the fact that I think the 1.5 is the most comfortable and the best one to use. But the data still shows that the 2.5 is the most preferred one if it's available with the 2.0 or the 1.5. But my first draw when I did this thing, it was like the more zoom the more zoom the better, but the more you play with it, you notice that the 1.5 is just like maybe a tad too good in that case.
But that has to be a really hard metric to try and measure by, because I assume a lot of people would pick the weapon because it has a 2.0. So you get a skewed perspective of, well, people are picking the 2.0 with the gun and not the other way around, right? So they kind of like lean towards if they're like, if you're playing Rook now, a lot of people are doing it because they want that 2.0. Whereas if Doc had it, they'd probably play him instead, right? So yep. It has to be difficult to look at those values, and then like there's a lot of things you gotta, I guess, already look into just to figure out if the scope actually has any kind of real impact on them, or if people are picking those guns because of this.
I mean, I think it's all right to have it both ways. I mean,
Yeah.
I really like to play Sophia, so I get the 2.0 on my gun. But if I really like playing the 2.0, I might end up playing Sophia because I want to play the 2.0, and I know that she has it. So I think it's a good relationship to have, like, it, like you choose a site or you choose an operator, and it helps make operator feel unique a bit. Not like completely unique, but you feel like, oh, I want to play 1.5 on attack, so I know those operators have it. So helps me sort out who I want to play or what weapon I want to try.
Do you have any data on Doc Rook before this season, after this season? I mean, off the surface, my thinking is Doc's pick rate has probably gone down dramatically. His win rate probably has gone up, and Rook's pick rate has probably gone up, and his win rate down. That would be my guess off the top of my head.
Let me check that. Rook actually got a big jump in QD, so for some reason he's performing better.
Okay.
For some reason. So he's performing better. His P90 actually got more pick rate now for some...
Does that have the 2.0 as well?
No, it has a 1.5. So if I guess people still want to play Rook, but they want to play with 1.5, they go toward the P90. So maybe that's why.
Wow, that is surprising. It's not. Are people picking the P90 more, or is it just an increase in the P90? Okay. All right.
It's an increase of the P90. They don't take it over the MP5, obviously.
Oh, okay. Obviously.
Yeah. Duck actually, like, poor guy, he skyrocketed downward. Went from 41% presence to something 13. No, that's not the right one. He's at 13 pick rate right now.
Wow.
His win delta went from a bit to near zero toward -1%.
Okay.
So it's still LT where he is right now, to be honest.
But that is insane. Like what? Sorry, you said 40 to 13?
Yes.
Just for the scope. That's the only thing that happened was that Doc lost ACOG, and he didn't get a 2.0. He got a 1.5.
Exactly. We can say that one is totally on me, to be honest. If you ask why Rook has the 2.0 and why Doc has the 1.5, they both share all the same weapons, so I wanted to make sure that they were different. And when confronted with the decision of putting the longest range on either Rook or Doc, I was like, well, Rook actually brings play to the other guys, so let's give it to the guy that will actually help a bit the rest of the team before going to the window. So
thank you,
that's why
by the way, for that.
That's why I went that way. Rook didn't change much, to be honest. He went a bit higher in pick rate, but it's something like 12 to 15 or something like that. It's not a big gap. I would say Legion got the most of it.
Really?
He did the opposite of Doc. So, yeah, most likely Legion with the 1.5. He's the one that got everything from the gunner type of player.
So Legion's pick rate with this patch, Legion gained the 1.5 on his T5, and his pick rate has gone up significantly. Is that fair to say?
Yes, but his pick rate went down. No, not his pick rate, his win rate. Sorry.
Okay.
But don't they often go kind of hand in hand on changes? If we don't talk about like new operators getting introduced, we talk about any kind of change. If they climb in pick rate, they normally drop in win rate or in performance. And if they drop, they normally climb in because isn't that what we've seen with like Ash, Maestro, almost everything that had like any kind of big changes? We probably saw it with Mossy when he lost the shotgun as well, that the people that actually stuck with it were getting more kills, but he was being picked less or winning more. Isn't that just like a rule of big numbers, right?
That's usually how it goes. The one exception that I recall is once again Ella, when I did the first buff on her, that went up and everything went up. So that's why the change came really close after that, because it was going up like in pick rate and in win delta. But usually you're right, it's going pick rate up, win delta down.
But it is fascinating that the only thing that changed with Doc, like we didn't see a rework of him or anything big, like massive gadget changes or anything. You took a 2.5 sight away and gave him a 1.5. And he fell almost 30%.
Yep. I'm pretty much convinced that the weapon selection and the weapon sights actually drive the popularity. Won't affect as much the win delta, but it will affect the popularity of a weapon of an operator. I'm convinced of that.
Are you happy with that? I mean, do you think that would you and the rest of the team prefer if an operator's unique gadget had more to do with their pick rate and their popularity than what their weapon and attachments do?
I think it forces us to work together and make something that is both appealing. But usually, if we wanted to do like a quick shift in the popularity of an operator, the swapping weapon is usually the easiest. Swapping weapon or just like nerfing or buffing the recoils is usually something that will drive an instant interest into the gadget. If we look at the operators like Class or Warden, even though they were buffed or can take Kaid in that case, it steadily went up in pick rate and win delta, but it didn't like swing. So, I mean, at the end of the day, the gadgets are important and they make the operators, but people are going to gun. I mean, that's the main part of the game. Exactly. So I think it's important to have both because the win delta is most likely driven by the gadget and how it's going to be used, and the weapon will drive the popularity. I think it's a short version of the analysis we can do. So, but there's more to it, obviously.
What other operators saw like crazy change?
In the win delta?
In pick or win delta, anything like truly affected by the sight.
Nomad went up a good chunk. She's near the 30% right now.
She went right on the ARX.
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly. Aside that, who's that? Who's that red line here? I think that's Pulse, no? Oh, that's Echo. Echo dropped a bit because obviously he lost the 2.0. Beside that, Thatcher, but it's most likely due to his rework.
Yeah.
The other one would be IQ, obviously. IQ went from 45 to 31%.
What about Mathie? So my initial impression, I put out a tweet, I think it was yesterday. I think that the Roni is now the best gun on defense. And I know that's quite a statement. When you start thinking about the Alda, you start thinking about, some of the heavy, MP7 is definitely up there. FMG 9 should probably be considered one of the best in all honesty. But the Roni has zero recoil, insane rate of fire, and it has a 1.5.
And it's killed you a lot.
Well, yeah, man. I don't know. No, I almost feel like Mozzie's like the new Jaeger almost, or like I feel like a lot of people are gravitating to him for that gun right now, and the 1.5. So if my initial impression would be that we would see Mozzie with a much higher pick rate so far this season, or especially if you skewed that data for like the last 2 weeks. Well, I guess the season's only been out for about that long. I don't know how that would affect his win-loss necessarily, but I feel like he's being picked a lot more.
So everything went up a bit. It's not, like drastic. It's not a huge line because that's what we do. We take the previous data from the previous season and we put where they are. So we draw a line of where they go. It's like a graph. So it went up, but it's not like a huge line. We're talking about 18% pick rate before to 24.
Okay.
Which is okay because like the 25-30% when you start breaking that, it's pretty good. I mean, you're going to see those operator pretty often. There's not a lot of them when you split the graph. It's out of the bunch if you like to see it that way. And his pick rate when delta went up from 0.2 to 1. Around. So he's getting more pick and he's getting better.
Let me ask you this. I'm sorry, more of like an overall question here. So Mozzie previously was performing really well, had a high pick rate when he had the super shorty. That was removed and that affected his pick rate pretty significantly. So now, if his pick rate gets back up to that point, it will be because of a weapon and an attachment, where the super shorty could be looked at as a utility tool. Are you okay with that? Does that matter at all? That like if Mathie gets back up there to that point that he was before, and it's due to fragging capability instead of the utility he brings to the team, is that a concern?
If he goes back at the same spot, maybe we'll think about like the recall and everything for this particular weapon, because the pick rate of the weapons really changed. It was 75% for the commando before Shadow Legacy, and now it's the opposite.
Wow.
25% for the commando and 75 for the P10. So if it's only for that, because the thing with Mathie before, he was super popular. You see Jaeger, usually his win delta is around 1 or -1. Usually, if you look back at all the season, he always like have a little impact because there's so many rounds where he is. So he has little impact on the win delta of it. But Mathie had a super big impact on the win delta. It's alright to be super present. I mean, it's going to happen. Some operators are going to be more enticing to play. But if the win delta goes too high, it's something we could look into. And the one thing with the sights and scope, we wanted to make sure that they were easy to remove, easy to give. That was the first constraint that we put ourselves when we started to work on those. So it should be easy for us to just say, well, the 1.5 is problematic. Let's flip it off.
It's fascinating how much it has in terms of impact on gun pick, and I'm flabbergasted that that's all it takes to sway people to pick something.
Yep, there's a lot of perceptions in that. I mean, we can talk about the famous G8 that goes brrr, and that weapon is completely broken. From my side, if I look at the data, it's exactly the same pick rate as the commando. Like it's always 45% for each. The killer KD for the commando is usually higher than the G8, but the perspective of I have 50 bullets, I never reload, and I go brrr, is so fun for the player. I mean, it's something that you feel good, you feel nice playing that kind of thing. And to me, that I feel like it's cool because you feel powerful, you feel like you're OP. How many videos do we see on YouTube saying, oh, the new sights are OP and everything? There's no stats that are broken showing that this one is particularly too strong or something like that, but you feel good playing them. And I think that's like the best achievement we could do, or we could have hoped here. And I feel like that's super cool for that.
I think we should link a video down in the description. I shared a couple of days ago about all the way back in Wolfenstein Enemy Territory. There was, and this is a really cool, super short story. They had the MP40 and the Thompson. Both guns were completely identical. Not a single difference stat-wise. Same magazine, reload speed, damage, everything. View model was different, but the Thompson had more bass on the audio. And the statistics showed that people performed better with the Thompson. When they changed the audio of the Thompson, they started getting even again. But everyone was 100% convinced that the Thompson was just a better gun. And they couldn't figure out what it was. Then they tweaked the audio, and they ended up balancing it out. I guess that's kind of the same power trip I get when I'm running around with the G8, because I definitely feel like I have way more power with that thing. Sure, an accurate, well-placed shot is the same from both guns, but there's a difference to turning a corner just holding mouse while, right?
Yep.
Even if I lose the gunfight, I feel like I had a really good chance of winning it. But the fact that something as just the audio of the gun can have an impact on your power perception of how good it is. Yeah, if we can't read every single stat on that weapon, it is so difficult to really assess how good something actually is.
There's another example of that, like when you talk about sound and perception of things. When we're working on Wamai, we knew that we wanted to give that guy an assault rifle because he was going to go ahead with Jaeger. So I took like the bottom 3 ARs from attack and was looking at which one should I give it. And whenever I was comparing anything, would it be recoil, damage, everything, the 416 kept being at the bottom of those. And whatever option I was going to pick was going to be better than the 416. So that scared me like crazy. I was like, am I really going to give a weapon that is better to than the 416 on attack and defense? And yeah, that has to be the feeling of playing the 416 has to play so much in this pick rate and how comfortable you feel when you use that weapon.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be the sound, has to be the handling and everything. So just like when we talk about 3 armor characters that go so slowly, the perception of seeing the gun swing slowly instead of going super fast like the R4C makes you think that you go super slow and you're not getting where you want to. But at the end of the day, it's not that bad. It's just everything that is built around it can have a big impact on how you perceive things and how you assess the power levels. Yeah. If we go back to Mathie, we were talking about the P10 Roni. When we started Shadow Legacy, you most likely noticed that he had like no new sight, no new scope.
Yep.
Just to give you a frame of how long it's been since I was working on that, he didn't lose a shotgun when I was doing that distribution, and that's why he had nothing, because he was so high in the pick rate. And when Delta, I was like, and it came on live, and I was like, oh, I think I forgot someone there. So that's why at the end of the day I went with the P10, just because it was the less preferred weapon, and I wanted to see how it competes with the Commando with the Olo. So far so good, maybe too good, we'll see.
Can you talk?
This must help. This must help a ton with like how easy it's gonna. Well, okay, let's not use the easy toolbox, but you have a lot more options now to balance if things start getting out of hand.
Yep.
I assume that helps a ton. Just being able to tweak that around, like if Ash all of a sudden just falls out of favor and no one wants to play her anymore, you can give her 1.5, and then we're probably gonna see a skyrocket.
Yep.
But just the fact that you have all the gadgets you can play around with now, and the sights on top of that recall, and because like guns are probably not gonna be swapped left and right on existing operators because we already have the skins. And but it must be nice having that extra 1 metric, because before the only thing you could do with anyone was take away an ACOG or give them. Now you have a pretty good amount of options, right?
Yep. Just like we saw with Castle, he got the super shorty replaced from one of his pistol, and goes way better for him now. He did not skyrocket into like the middle of the pack, but he's doing way better, and that's an option that we did not have before. Just like swapping weapons, swapping from multiple sites and scope. So yes, it's super nice to have all of those tools.
You know what I think would be interesting, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, so if you don't have this data already, don't worry about it. But maybe as a dev blog or something down the road would be kill death ratio, maybe by weapon attach or by optic on attack. So I think personally there's a lot of players that would benefit from removing that ACOG, maybe not now as much, but in previously, by removing that ACOG and throwing on a 1x scope for certain rounds, because obviously that much zoom can be harmful in certain close quarter situations. So maybe you have that data, maybe you don't. Maybe you've seen that do players actually perform better than what we think they do on attack when they're using a 1x optic?
I do have this data, but it's a bit deeper than just like glancing. I do have the pick rate of the sites and the KD, obviously. But that brings another point where when I did the sites and scope, the initial distribution, I went with some, general rules like we had before, like no zoom levels on 3-speed and stuff like that. And at some point, it just like came impossible to be like, okay, the strict rules doesn't work. So it obviously turned into something like guidelines instead of hard rules. And some operators, I was left with the choice of handling whatever they wanted. And Buck is one of those examples. I didn't want him to keep the higher zoom level on his C8 just because, well, you're going to use that skeleton key, and having a 1.5 on it is going to improve your performance with it. That's for sure. So it helps a bit drive the what the player should expect to do with this operator. If your operator is like Thatcher, well, I made sure that he keeps a lot of longer range scopes just to make sure he plays a bit further. It's not Ash. Ash, for some reason, well, not for some reason, but Ash has the 1.5 on the G36, while Yana doesn't have the same scopes. It's mostly because what you expect to do with those operators. Oh, it's something that we could look into doing. I don't know if it's going to be a blog post or anything, but it's certainly interesting if we can share that kind of information. Sure. But it's something that crossed my mind when I did the distribution for sure.
One thing you said there that I think is really interesting, and correct me if I'm taking that wrong. You didn't give Buck the 2X or the ACOG in order to keep players from using it because you think they'll do better without it. Is that what you were saying there? Interesting.
I'm pretty sure. I mean, it was already one of the weapons that was near a 50-50 between the old ACOG and the Olo. So it felt natural to give him something that is less range. And I don't want to say it's a trap option, but it's certainly something that will put you in better situations where you don't overextend yourself because you have the skeleton key and you're aiming through metal bars with an ACOG or something like that. It's going to be... it's about giving tools to fit the gadget.
Can you see the... I don't know if this is something you have the data on or able to get it on. Can you see accuracy change between different scopes?
No, I don't have that. Like we explained last time I was on, it's hard to gather anything that is accuracy related because you will shoot through walls and stuff like that, and so it's not something that is easily exposed.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. You're like spraying open windows, and everyone would have a 1% accuracy over time.
Yeah, and you don't want to see that. I mean, usually you're used to open a accuracy data from other games, and you'd be like, "Oh, wow, I have 70%, 80%. Wow, I'm really good." And in Siege, you'd have like 0.05 because you're the one doing the rotations with the shotgun. So, it's not something we expose.
I guess headshot percentage would be the only one, but then again, that's with a lot of weapons that doesn't really count. What if you're shooting at legs and purpose, right? Shooting for drone holes or whatever it might be.
Or if you're like me, every headshot is complete luck. So I mean,
same, to be honest. Enough bullets and you're gonna hit at some point.
What about my man Mute? I've been really gravitating to him this season. And that MP5. I used to be by default Mute, shotgun, SMG11. Now I'm playing Mute MP5K with the 1.5. Am I alone in that? Are other players gravitating towards that as well?
You're not alone. We're talking about the something that was a relationship of 90-10% for the shotgun.
Okay. And
now it's more 75-25%.
So people are still bringing the shotgun, but not as one-sided as before.
Yeah, exactly.
Does that go for the FMG as well on smoke?
FMG, I think I wrote the same thing or something really similar to that. It's even worse. It used to be 98.2%. And now it's 50-50.
Whoa!
What?
Holy!
Yep.
That's awesome.
Wait, 50-50?
Yep.
We're talking entire player base, console, PC, or are we talking... What are we...
in this particular case, we're talking about the top players on PC.
Wow.
What?
Dude,
I saw... All the stats I mentioned before is mostly driven from the top PC players.
Okay.
I saw Hyper running it the other day on Villa against SSG. He was running FMG 9 1.5. I think somebody on SSG might have been doing that as well. So
if you can have impacts or something to do rotation, I know Pro League runs a lot of Castle now, so they have the shotgun there, so they can afford having Mute on the smoke on the FMG.
That is insanely impressive because for pretty much since
forever.
Yeah, I mean, I actually can't think of a time where you wouldn't be like kind of laughed at if you brought the FMG, right? Like everyone on your team would be like, you're throwing. But now the 1.5 and the fact that you do have a few more options to make rotate holes than if we go back to SMG 11 ACOG days. But it going from 98/2% to 50-50. That
That's
has to be like the biggest change of any main gun loadout ever.
Yes. Well, there's the Roni that swapped like, from 30% to 30-70. But it's, quite impressive.
That's insane.
And that's the kind of results that I love to see with those sites changes, because it's actually choices. Last time I was on, I was talking about meaningful choices and stuff that makes you invested in trying to figure out what to do on certain sites and certain situation. That's the kind of things I'd like to see when we talk about the Birders loadout.
Well, about choice, new sites.
Yes.
New site colors and opacity.
Yes.
Is there anything like? Can you guys actually see what colors people are mostly using, or?
Yes, we're tracking the color, and we are tracking who engaged with this feature. So if you choose to keep the default one, or if you go toward the personal color, the most popular color at that point was purple, but it was steadily going down. It was around 30% that was on purple. But since the launch, it steadily is going down for other options. We have the turquoise that is doing pretty good, and I think the other one was light green.
I'm a light green guy.
Yeah, same.
Yep. Those colors are amongst the highest pick rate, 25%, 15%, and 20%, if I remember correctly. To my biggest surprise, people engage with this feature a lot more on console than they do with PC. So instead of having on console, I think it's 50-50 or near 50-50, like people that change the colors instead of having the default one. And on PC, I think it was something like 75-25%, something like that. So I was really surprised to see that console players were really using that feature more than PC players, because that's usually the other way around when we talk about advanced deployment, advanced drone deployment, and stuff like that. Usually PC engage more with those kind of features.
Interesting. Wonder why that would be. I don't know. That's what I'm going to be thinking about for a while there. I know Zeronic has been talking about a lot, because we're talking about the site and the opacity, the fuzziness. So, yes. Zeronic, you got your man in front of you here, nail him down, and get this out here.
So, when we had the JD on, he kind of explained how it had to go from, I think it was a 2D object to a 3D object. That's like kind of why it ended up being a little more blurry. And he was mentioning that it was something you would look at, but he didn't really know. And now you're definitely one of the people that might know this. But I assume that it is true, and I'm not just turning into a boomer and getting old, but the sites are more blurry now.
Yep.
And if you do scale it up, because I went on and took some screenshots in 4K, and they look so good in 4K. But of course, I'm a FPS nerd, and as many frames as possible, so I run in low graphics and stretched aspect ratio and everything. And for me, it was massive change going from the old like 1 pixel dotted line around to kind of looks like it has anti-aliasing on now, pretty much.
Yeah, that's pretty much what happened. To be honest, it got caught into a rendering pass that smooths things, and so it went. It's now part of the HUD instead of being part of the model. So like you said, it's something that is 2D instead of being 3D. It's something that we are looking to fix.
Okay.
So that should be soon enough.
I don't need to go get glasses. It might actually be the site.
No, exactly.
Okay, I'm glad
you'll be fine. You'll be fine.
Well, that's great to hear. I mean,
that's super awesome to hear, because there are certain situations where that change made I wouldn't say it made a playstyle different, but like we had to change the opacity of sites to be able to hold certain angles that you did before. It was a big change once you've been this used to it. I think if it started like that, I'd probably never have noticed it. But that one day swap from one to another, I thought I was going crazy to start with. I had to like open up pictures next to each other, and I remember talking to you about it flanked as well, and you were like, well, it's not that bad.
Well,
So yeah, it's going to be fixed.
That's awesome there.
Can we talk a little bit about the 1X? Because, I mean, we talked a lot about the 1.5, the zoomed optics, but there were two new 1X optics introduced, a new hollow as well as a new red dot. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, but the reticle on the reflex was also, is it smaller, or is it just that the distance changed, so that's why it looks smaller now? I felt like the reticle on the reflex is smaller now.
I think that's the fussiness.
Is it the
that makes it look
maybe it is.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. But anyway, two new 1X. So let me start here. Do you want to get to a point where every 1X is viewed as balanced? Like each one has their pros and cons, and hopefully, players are spread out pretty evenly as far as which one they're selecting at any given time.
Take fault here because last time you had GB on, I know he mentioned like how we don't see each 1X being super like not balancing lever, but it was a discussion he had with me before that, so I'll take fault here. But let's say I give all the 1X today, like everyone has access to all the 1X. What's your first reflex? You're going to go Razor on everything, or the Russian reflex on everything, because those have the best housing, like the best casing.
And when you say Razor, are you saying holographic?
Yeah, the
old holographic.
No, the one from the FMG. Sorry.
Oh, okay, yeah, the Vortex.
Sorry.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, exactly. So if I give all the 1X, I'm pretty sure like all of the other options are going to tumble down. We're going to have a relationship with the Russian reflex, the Vortex, and the usual Olo. And I'm not sure that's what we need here. What I do here, though, is the access to the reticle themselves. That's something that can be vouched for, like saying when we discuss about accessibility, how I like my reticle and how I like what I see in it, and how it doesn't impact the gameplay around it, but just my ability to play the game correctly. I think that's fair. But the casing, that's something that I'm looking into. I'm trying to figure out what kind of next steps we're going to do. Obviously, I hear everyone when they say that they want the 1X on everything. It's just like that's the one thing where I'm definitely sure that everyone's going to run like the smaller housing, and we're going to have like 8 or 9 that did the 1X after that.
Well, we as players will optimize the fun out of the game if we get the option. If you give us everything, but that's just how it is, right? Like if you look at every other thing where you have options, if you have all the options, there will be one that is better somehow. It'll be a smaller housing, it'll be a better contrast, it'll be a better reticle, whatever it will be, and it will almost be the same across like most of the player base. And then you have to, for the next many years, keep all of these other optics that are used by like 3%. You have to make sure that they fit onto the new guns, that the skins do whatever they do with them, and it's. I think if we get too many options on that, it's not going to help much. You're just going to see the same thing picked all the time, right? And for me at least, it's kind of nice having some of the guns. Like I'm running the new red dot on Jaeger, for example. I love that sight. But I think if I had access to every single sight and everything, I would run that Nomad reflex sight on everything, right? And then I'd never get to have these like different setups, and you can argue that, well, maybe it would be better for me to just run the same thing over and over, but it also takes a little bit of the charm away from stuff. If like some guns have ACOG, some have 2 times, some have 1 red dot, and some have a reflex, right? It gives a little identity to each character.
That's one important thing that we are trying to keep here. Just like having a bit of personality in the sights and scope, it's something that is important to have. Like this operator is just not a gadget and everything. There's some subtlety about this operator, and there might be some slight reason why you prefer one over the other. And I think that the sights, the 1X, do have a bit of impact on that. But I do hear, and I swear, I hear the people when they say that they want the 1X on everything. I just don't think it's exactly like how it should be. Like just like open all the options and have all the options. Maybe talking about the reticle being given to everyone because it's more the accessibility. That's something I can look into, and I'm not promising anything or whatever, but I'm looking into it.
Well, it's all really interesting to me because if we just look at the old 1X, so and excluding the Russian optics, so between the red dot, the holographic, and the reflex, the old ones, in my opinion, the most common of those three was the holographic. But that's also the one that had the worst casing, in my opinion. The best casing of those three was probably the reflex. But I think that the reticle on the reflex drove a lot of people away. That's my opinion on how that all went down. So, to hear you talk about the 1X currently, it seems like you think that people are prioritizing case over reticle, correct? Is that what you were saying, or am I mischaracterizing that?
That's my guess, indeed. The reflex had like this situation where you were not, if you're a new player and you don't know reticle, how it behaves and everything, do you know that you shoot at the center of the tip of the diamond, or do you shoot at the middle of the diamond? Yeah. It's a really hard to grasp sight, so I can see why people go and move away from it. But it's the sight that is the most used on shotguns, because smaller casing, you see where you're shooting. So usually the balance, when we talk about the three default sights, something like 99% holo, 1% reflex, the rest is red dot. So people actually already did that, just like writing off the current red dot. So maybe I'm wrong here. I'm thinking that it's only about the casing. Maybe, like you said, there's something about the reticle. It's something I'm looking into. It's just I want to make like a good decision instead of giving everything, and after that maybe being like, hey, you know what, guys, there was a mistake that was made and we're taking stuff back. It's not something that would be acceptable, I think. So yeah, I'm looking into trying to make the most sense out of it and seeing what we can provide to the player.
Can you give us a sneak peek behind the curtain? Like, is there anything that you're looking at right now since the launch of the season where you're like, whoa, I didn't expect that. That has my attention. Maybe I'm going to have to tweak some of the sight options on this operator, or has everything pretty much worked out how you thought it was going to?
To my big surprise, Mira is fine. Even during the reveal trailer, I was like, I'm excited for it, but I'm not sure. And we had like awesome story about why it did not have ACOG originally. But when you think about it, it's just like, it's a long range operator that does not have the scopes on. Doesn't make sense, like fundamentally you want to slap something that is long range on Mira because she's going to be far away from the engagement. But it's fine, to be honest. Nothing surprisingly overpowered or going out of bounds. Beside that, the one that is, like looking not so good and maybe a bit worrying, it has to be Legion. Like I mentioned, he's the one that got the most out of the gunner feel from Duck. So we'll see about him. Maybe he has too much utility to go on with such a like a gunner playstyle. We'll see. But yeah, beside that, everything seems positive, to be honest. I haven't seen like that is worrying so far.
It was kind of nice seeing Legion and Melusi kind of leveling out, though, with Legion getting the 1.5 and Melusi getting a little bit of a nerf. Because I don't know if the numbers back this up, but at least playing, like in the higher-ish elo, it doesn't feel like one is like super over-represented compared to the other. Whereas right when Melusi came out, sure, she's new and hype and all of that, but you saw her like every round, right when, and now it seems a little more 50-50 between one or the other. I don't know if that's true number-wise, but I assume Legion getting a bit of a buff and her getting a bit of a nerf kind of even things out a little.
That was the main driver, obviously, to give the 1x 1.5 on Legion. At first, my first couple of iterations didn't have it on, but during some play session, they were like, "Yeah, do you feel like Legion was like losing the edge over Lucy?" And we tried it, and like how it is. Yeah, it feels right. It feels good. I mean, if you have played with the T5, with the 1.5, it feels really good. So that's why it stayed there. We'll try to see. I mean, I would love to keep the option on him because it's a different way to play. It allows you to take some different engagement and everything. It feels different from Belusi. So I'll try to, as much as possible, to keep it on him, but we'll see how it goes.
Do you guys?
What about DMRs? Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna on the subject of like people going from Dock to Legion. Do you guys track at all like average time alive in a round, or how long the operators are surviving into the round? Yeah, and I'm asking like, did people go from spawn peaking with Dock to Legion?
I do not. I'm pretty sure we track this. To be honest, I just don't have that data.
Sure. That's understandable.
Around, but I do have the average kill distance.
Oh, okay.
So it actually gives me information about that. And so far, it didn't show like it was the case.
Okay.
I think they're just like more. Let me try to get that quickly. Legion is average. It's 11.2 meters for the average kill distance, which is lower than Maestro, similar to Mathie.
Wait,
lower than Kavira.
Maestro.
That's interesting.
Maestro is still at 12.1. Oh, sorry, I got debated there. I saw the bigger number and I was thinking it was going to be the Elda, but it's actually the ACS that has this 12.1 kill distance.
Oh, yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's 10.3 on the Elda.
Okay.
Cool.
So it's a bit above average, but it has the 1.5. So obviously it's going to be a bit more than average. But I think it was something like 13.62 for Duck before losing his ACOG.
Wow.
So it's not a straight 1-for-1. They just started the spawn peak with the Legion instead. I opened the data and it makes me think about the other operators that were positively affected by the 1.5. Not Kavira, Frost is one that won the most.
Oh, wow.
Last time I was on, we were discussing about how our KD is usually high compared to the kind of weapon she has, which is true. I mean, you're going to kill people that are in Frost Trap, so it's going to inflate that value. But so far, with that addition, she's closer to Jaeger than she was before. So on console, she's like one of the top fragging weapon.
Wow.
So she won a lot from that. And it's actually interesting because, yes, there's most likely some inflation to the Frost Trap, but it's a super low rate of fire weapon, higher capacity than the usually 30, and which translates into easy recall, lots of bullet, and lots of initial damage. So it's interesting to see that a weapon can perform good without having, like this usual super high rate of fire and everything. That was one that stood out to me when I was taking the data.
I found the AA-12 or the new changed slug shotgun extremely good. The second you put like a scope on that thing, you can instantly create an angle through half of the map, and while you still need to hit them quite a few times compared to like the old TSG, it feels so strong in certain situations. So I'm super happy to see that be something. I don't know if it's something other people share and actually being paid a decent amount. They're probably not being played as much as I think they are. But DMRs, on the other, did they see any kind of increase at all with the new change? Because they are the only ones getting the big boy scopes. They've been changed quite a few times. They can open hatches, change to open barricades easier. That was even last time you were on I think as well. But they still seem to be kind of forgotten by the players.
Yep. They're actually making a small entry. It's the first time that they actually really move from change. Blackbeard is the one that is the most affected.
Yeah.
He used to have something like 10%, and even the 10% he had before was pretty good. Now we're 25%. So that's pretty big jump. Operators like Lion now has 10% on the 470. So they feel a bit niche, which is most likely exactly what I want, because I know that those weapons won't have the same pick rate as other weapons. But if we're starting to see the growth toward 10%, I think that's at least they have a role, they have a place, they have something to do, and that's a good thing. They're most likely all moving toward that 10% mark. Let me see. 10% on Lion. Dokkaebi, obviously. Buck didn't change much, but Blackbeard, like I said, 25%. Twitch is still a bit lower, 7%. So yeah, it's going up, but still not as big as you would expect after all those changes.
But it also seems like it's a tipping point kind of weapon, right? Like the second you make it good enough for it to really be picked, it's going to be the only thing.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that.
And feel very oppressive. I've always felt like that. Like DMRs in any FPS I've ever played have been the hardest thing to balance. Either they're OP or not worth it. I do think Siege has an interesting opportunity with messing with some of the interactions at DMRs. Like for example, opening hatches. That's a great change to the DMRs. Maybe you could look at maybe a DMR could destroy a deployable shield or something like that down the road. That would be kind of fun. But
we discussed.
Okay.
We discussed that at some point. Obviously, it comes up from time to time on Twitter. There's two things. We don't have a way to show you how much damage you cause to those gadgets. So, how many bullets is too much? How many bullets it won't be enough? Will you remember that you shot 3 times and you need to shoot 6 times after that one guy swung you because you're actually shooting his gadget? After that, there's a whole lot of distribution that needs to come with that kind of change. What kind of world do we want to see Blackbeard being super present because he brings some gadget clearing? So there's a lot of things, and the readability of shooting gadgets and not having feedback is the one that is most likely driving us back here. I mean, we've all done this in shooting a frost mat and be like, hey, didn't I destroy it? It's the only gadget right now that has HP, and it's confusing for players. Borderline can be frustrating if you think that it should be destroyed. It's not, and yeah.
I could see some abuse as well from like the defender, right? If it was just damage based and it wasn't keyed to the DMR only, you'd start seeing defenders like purposely damage the shield so they could like when you prep a castle, you'd have a shield and it looks like it's just ready. It takes 1 bullet and now it's gone. Like you could mess up some people with that stuff.
Sounds fun.
Free Fire.
Yeah,
Free Fire would come from that.
Yeah, it'd be scary to deal with. You're walking up and all of a sudden that shield gets sprayed down by the defender himself, right? But it would be interesting to see, I don't know, some sort of thing with DMRs where, because like them opening hatches is actually pretty huge, right? Like you don't have to bring a buck or a sledge, breach charges or whatever. And when the roof hatches aren't reinforced, some maps, Cafe, it's kind of nice being able to open those 2 hatches without using any kind of explosive for it, right? But then again, you feel very limited after that, unless you're one of the operators where you don't have a choice, like Glass or Dokkaebi. They just seem kind of forgotten on Twitch and Lion, and I thought they would have seen more when they got the big boy scope, but it's probably just that 1.5 is so comfortable for most people anyway, and now you have the same on both attack and defense in most of your rounds, right? But
maybe it's something down the line to actually look at the options that are, maybe just like go with the shorter range options. I mean, could be something we try down the line. I mean, it's not like the last buff they will have, and we'll see how it goes with other options. Is it time to make them quicker to ADS? Is it time to, I don't know, look at the individual reloads and stuff like that? there's still a lot of things we can do and to make them more enticing.
What's your next gadget to change?
What?
What's the next attachment you want to change?
No
comment.
No comment. Well, like last time we mentioned, the muzzle attachments. There's a lot of cleaning to do in there. Yeah, it's most likely going to be the muzzle attachments that are going to receive love down the line.
Cool. I'm excited. I'm excited to hear that. I think, we've already said it once, but the one thing you can say after Operation with Shadow Legacy is that more than any other time in this game's history, every time you select an operator, there's a real choice between the operator you choose first of all, and also the weapon that you bring with that operator more than any other time. And that's a great thing. I'm really happy with that. So if we achieve that same thing with weapon attachments, that would be huge in my opinion. One operator along those lines that I want to throw it out there. You do what you want with this information. Capital and the para. I feel like the para should have the 2-0 personally, but I understand it is now a choice. If you're going to bring that LMG, the LMG does still have the 2-0. It lost that really good scope that it had, both him and Gridlock had, but it does have the 2-0, and if you're bringing that, then you'll get that. I kind of feel like the para should have it as well, but if I understand why you went the direction you did.
It's actually one of let's use rule here. The first things I tackled, it was 1.5 maximum on 3-speed attacker. That was my first target. I was like, nothing is going to have more than that. Obviously, you can see that that rule has been transgressed, or I went over it at some cases. Like Hibana got the 2.5 back at some point, and Capital has more options on the LMG. The other case was LMGs, while not having a super unique scope like the DMRs have, they all have more options. Like if you pick a LMG, the boon that they got in that release is actually more choices. You pick an LMG, you most likely have the choice of 1.5, 2.0, and 2.5. One interesting thing about Capital is with this season, the LMG got more pick rate than it used to have. Most likely because people want to reuse the 2.5 that they were used to. So that's most likely one of the reasons. And it's one of the only 3-speed that still have access to that. The other one would be Ibena and IQ, if I remember correctly.
IQ Orc.
Yeah, on the Orc.
Yeah.
So that's a couple of rules that started as art rules, and they've been bent because it felt more natural. Just like Ibana at some point only had the 1.5, but that when we were discussing the mix between Termite, Ace, Ibana, and all the art breachers, we're like, not maybe actually Ibana is the longest range out of the three. So it felt natural to give her back the option to go with the 2.5, and it's one of the few 3-speed that has it on a the usual weapon that you would pick for.
It's kind of nice though, because on some of those operators that might not have been played as much before, you're kind of nudging players over to give them a try again, or maybe play them a bit more because of certain site changes and stuff. So it feels a little like there's sometimes a change in the guy who wanted to play the 3-speed with the ACOG might be a little bit more likely to now take a Heartbreacher, right? Yeah.
If we talk about Ace, I mean,
yeah.
One of the reasons he has the AK-12 is we want people to have play a Heartbreacher. I mean, you'll have a good gun and you'll have a Heartbreach, so you're going to be useful to your team if you want to go all in and being a gunner. You can also toss your aces. So yes, it's something that is important to have good balance of, yes, I know you want to play the good old FPS, you press shift and you don't release from it until you see someone, but you also bring utility when you do that. That's one of the drivers that was in that pass too.
Are those two guns as strong as we think? The AK-12 and the SC-3000? Because for me, right now playing, that seems like, without a doubt, I mean, from a statistical point of view, number-wise, sure, they're the strongest, but they also feel the strongest.
And not the AK-12. Like the last time we mentioned, even on Ace, it's not as high as you would have on the FMG, like we spoke last time on the.
I thought that thing would slay.
I mean, it's a good kitty. Let's not lie about that, but it's not crazy bonkers, and it's not like the main killer when you talk about Ace with the AK. So as much as people are, like wondering if it should change and if everything is it too OP, the stats doesn't reflect something that is on the weapon side of things.
The SC to me though, the thing that really separates it, I feel like on the SC you can realistically run angle grip. To me, the recoil on the SC feels much more. Well, I don't know if much more would be the right word, but it feels less recoil-wise than the AK-12. So I feel like I can run angled on SC, which when you look at the DPS of that, and you combine that with me running angle grip, that feels really, really good. So, and I understand why. I mean, I think it was JB, right, Alex, that we had on here, and we're asking him, hey. Sam's kit is kind of ridiculous. Like, he's got a really good gadget. He's got arguably the best gun on attack, and then he's got grenades. And he was like, if we're going to introduce an attacker in this meta and we want them to get picked, they need to have a good kit.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense with Ace as well, right? Like, you want to bring a hot breacher, and you kind of got to make him good enough for people to actually want to pick him.
Yeah, and exactly. And if you can actually convince everyone that you want to pick Ace, like I'm pretty sure you have comps where you were like, I want to play Ace, you're arguing over who wants to play him. That's a good thing because it doesn't feel like a burden to bring some hard breach. If we're talking about Ace, not Ace, Zero's SC, the stats once again are not crazy. The guy spends a lot of time on cameras and stuff like that, so once again, it's not on par with the super big fraggers that we have. So once again, I would say it's cool because people feel powerful. They feel like they have control when they pick that kind of weapon. They are having a good time. They don't have a negative impact on the amount of kills that they get. It's not a negative experience for the other teams. I think it's fantastic if people are actually happy to have great weapons like that.
Something just jogged my mind here when you were talking about comparing attacker weapons. You said the FMG9.
Yep. And
the last time you were on, the FMG9 was like a really surprising weapon. Or can you give us an update on that? How's the FMG? Because the FMG9 on Nook, on the last time he was on, for anybody who didn't watch that episode, it performed in the top 5. I don't remember where it was, but it was in the top 5 like KD weapons on attack. And now it has a 1.5. So how are we looking now with Nook and the FMG9?
I'm going to do something that is quite funny here. It's the same as the G8, but for IQ without the ACOG.
KD, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So we're talking about 0.71.
So you get with the FMG9, Nook gets 0.71 kills per round.
Yes. If we're talking about Ace with his AK-12, we're talking about 0.68.
Okay.
And if we're talking about Zero, we're talking about 0.62. So it's still really high.
Just so we get like an idea of, because it's easy enough to say, okay, it's 0.6 per round, but what's considered a lot and what's considered a little when we look at that? Like, what's a really high one and a really low one?
A really high one, let's talk about Jaeger because we all like to see that. It's 0.77 for Jaeger.
But that's on defense. The fact that Nook is in that ballpark on attack seems really high to me.
The highest one on attack has to be Blackbeard because Blackbeard, he has a shield to protect himself. So we're talking about 0.81. It's the highest in the game.
Damn.
But then the high average has to be 0.72.
Okay.
So she's in the high average because if we're talking about lower. More utility operators, 0.60 seems to be an average. Yeah, 0.60 on attack seems to be the low average.
I think you'll see Sam's go up. I really do. I think people are new. They're figuring him out. There's, like you said, they're spending a lot of. I know I fall guilty of this. Whenever I have a new operator, I'm obsessed with their gadget. For like the first 2 seasons that I play that operator, I just want to play with their new toy, and it'll get me killed a lot. Once people calm down and actually use that a little bit more efficiently and don't become obsessed with it, I think you'll see Sam go up.
One of the important thing about Zero's loadout, people would assume that the SC is picked like through the roof, and we're talking about 60-40.
Oh, wow.
That's almost 1-for-1, so that's pretty good.
That's just the banded mains on attack. That's all it is.
That, you know, when we were discussing the loadout of Zero, we wanted to have like another option that felt, you know, like Splinter Cell, obviously. So the MP7 was one of the weapons he used in the previous game. And we were like, we don't know. After that, I thought about it. When is going to be the next time I can put a 1.5 on that gun? And just from there, we were like, oh, it feels super great. Let's do it. And let's go with it.
I bet you wanted to try a 2.5 just for fun.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't want to get... I think that was the first initial discussion, but then again, we went with the 1.5.
What, Alex? What do you grab? Like, for me, the traditional ACOG versus the 2, I'm actually preferring the 2-time. I think it falls right in a nice level of zoom. I think the casing is better than traditional ACOG. And I'm actually gravitating towards that reticle. I would say their best reticle in the game, in my opinion, is still traditional ACOG, but the 2-time reticle is I like it. So are you of a similar mindset, Alex, or do you still gravitate towards that old ACOG when you can? Because like I'm like on Amaru, for example, she's got traditional ACOG and 2-times. Yeah. I'm going towards 2-times. Now Amaru, you could argue G8. Maybe I'm playing a little bit closer up. Maybe that's why I'm doing it with her. But I just kind of feel like when I can run 2-times, that's what I'm gravitating towards.
I think I definitely prefer the reticle in the ACOG because I prefer everything coming to like the sharp point. Mm-hmm. So I can hold like the tightest angle with my boomer reflexes and still win gunfights against all the fast young kids, right? For me, the 2-times is a little busy in the reticle itself, but I love the housing. And I think between 1.5 and 2-time is without a doubt the most comfortable zoom level to play with. When we just think about like the field of view and the sensitivity and all of that, it's like the easiest thing to transfer from, if you go from hipfire to anything past like 2.5 or even past 2, it's a lot harder to be equally as accurate, if that makes sense.
We're going to have to say 3.0 because that was what we were used before, right?
Yeah. But even with ACOG back then, like I had to set my ADS sensitivity lower than I'd otherwise want it to be because once I zoomed in, like that massive change was way too much. Now between like 1.5 and hipfire and hipfire and 2.0, I don't really feel like that big of a multiplier or change in it. It's not that bad. But even going to ACOG now, the 2.5, it still feels a little crazy. So having those individual sliders is really nice.
Yeah.
That's another thing. Thank you a ton for that, by the way.
This probably wouldn't have been possible without that, right? Like we couldn't have done this without that. Surely. Like you would have a different ADS at 1-times, 1.5, 2, 2.5, and 3. You would have 4
Bishamoto
and Kali. So you'd have 5 different ADSs in the game, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, we couldn't.
So it was definitely something that we needed to tie together. Because the earlier version were mostly, like us trying to multiply a value of your ADS towards something that we think is right. But definitely couldn't be as accurate as what we have right now, and which actually takes into account the zoom level, aspect ratio, and stuff like that. So we needed to tie both of them together.
But when you use the standard one now, if you were to click away from advanced ADS settings to standard, don't you use like a baseline thing now for how it scales between zoom levels? Because there's something with how our vision and eye-hand coordination works when we feel like things are closer or further away. So there has to be like a calculation you do on each of the sites to not make the high zoom ones feel way too fast, right?
Yeah, that's why it's based on the aspect ratio and not some random values that we had before.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a bit harsh when I say random value, but it was a value that was like super hard set by zoom level, and it was not taking into account the aspect ratio, the zoom level, and everything. It's something. This whole new system is better in every way possible, besides not being the old one. I mean, it has every quality that it can have, besides being the old one. Yeah.
And you can achieve the exact same sensitivity, I assume, as you could before. Like you can hit the exact same if you were to like change your INI and the multiply and all of that. Like it is possible to get the exact same sensitivity.
It's going to be really, really near, but it's, like I said, since it was not taking into account all, like the aspects of the camera, it won't be like a 1-for-1, but it's like 0.999%. I'm gonna do that. Some kind of publicity for germs killing tea. So yeah, it's really near. It won't be exactly the same, but it's enough to make you think it's the same. Yeah.
Well, I think as we approach the end here, and by all means, Alex, if there's something that you want to mention, feel free here. But is there anything, as you have the data there in front of you, are there any sleepers out there that you feel like you're looking at the data, you see that this operator has gone one way or the other, and you don't feel like the average player is picking up on it as fast or as well as they should?
I'm going to go with the funny one first. The pick rate on the Boss G on defense went from 2% to 15%, so that's a thing. So
we want to have ACOG. I mean,
exactly.
You absolutely
you can't take it away.
have to have ACOG.
and the data is actually top rank PC. It's not like casual random game. It's the best players on PC picking the Boss G often. Wamai's AUG and MP5K. It's really close right now in the pick rate. It used to be a landslide or near a landslide, and now it's 60-40. What were the ones?
Smoke and his FMG and shotgun. That's
crazy.
Still that has to be the crazy.
Are you seeing his KD go up? Is there any change there between this season and last season? Or is it relatively the same?
For Smoke, it's similar to what it was before. He's always like a bit underneath in the wind delta. Always a good presence. But yes, it's no major change there. Obviously, Capcan with his 9X, that's one that really changed a bit toward the top, and Skiddy.
That's a great point, because that gun doesn't have much recoil at all.
It's a really good gun.
So getting that 1.5x on Capgun is a great point. I'm glad you brought that up.
The other one that I think stands up is Cade's AUG A3. That one is getting more popular and has a lot of KD increase. I know that's like a weapon that has been slept on for a while. The TCS was so good. The AUG kept getting buffed and buffed and buffed, and still wasn't pursing like a good pick rate. Now it's closer to what, like having a choice between both. So that's one to try out, obviously. And after that, I think it's pretty much it. In surprise, the G36 is performing really good, better than I thought. Not on Ash, obviously, but on Yanas. She's doing really good.
Cool.
That's one weapon that is usually bypassed, because you always think of the R4C first, or you would take the ARX, but the G36 is doing pretty good right now. And I think that's it for the big major surprises.
Cool.
Is there any recall you've changed?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Like I said, it's the feeling of, it's like when we do a new season and stuff like that. The feeling of preparing those things is like, you think about a loved one, you made the perfect gift for them, and you just can't wait to give them that gift. That's how we feel when we do some new stuff and new things like that. So we can't wait to actually show them. So, like I said, whenever I'm going to change a recoil or something like that, I'm going to come up with whistles and balloons.
And balloons, yeah.
Yep.
Well, I appreciate that, and we'll be keeping a lookout for the whistles and balloons for when that comes. And seriously, I appreciate you coming on and sharing this data with us. This is super enlightening stuff that I find to be very fascinating, and great job. I mean, I think the change to the optics is one of the most significant changes that this game's ever seen. I think, and for it to happen, and I think roll out to overwhelming positivity is a good thing. Like, that's, to make a significant change to the game that's approaching 5 years old, and for it to be received well, cannot be easy to do, just because people don't like change, So I think, hats off to you and the rest of the team for executing this so well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll pass the word for sure. Like the Kiev team that worked on the accessibility and everything for that. My good friend Melo that worked on the sensitivity. I'll share the word with them, and it's so incredible. Just before the season launch, we were actually wondering how much stuff is there that we managed to put in there. It's, even from our perspective, it's crazy, like the amount of things that got into that season.
The fact that you managed to put that much in while doing work from home, and had the audacity and backbone to remove so many ACOGs is without everyone freaking out, because I remember when Jaeger and Bandit lost their ACOGs, and I know people that are still like fuming today.
Oh, I still get YouTube comments every day. I bet I would be willing to bet that I get one YouTube comment per day since that has happened, still to this day, about Jaeger or Bandit losing ACOG.
Yeah, and now a lot more have lost it, but we've gotten something that fits in between, and that was good.
If we talk about the Jaeger losing his ACOG, I think it was last summer, not this one, but the one before. I was taking the bus back home, had my R6 cap on, and someone runs to me and he's like, "Give Jaegers his ACOG back," and he runs back. And I was like, what just happened there? So yeah, people still have it on. It was a funny moment. It's just like, didn't understand. I don't know where he went after that, but he really wanted me to give the ACOG back.
That's great.
It's impressive change, and it's been pretty smooth for how much has changed, because it is like an overwhelming amount of new stuff.
Yes, that's it's hard to predict where every operator is going to fall out in the in the next season, in the balancing meters and everything, where all of those changes are going to drive them. Did I make a mistake? Are they all good choices? So yeah, it's super crazy. Like you asked GB last time how it felt the day before it launched. I was a bit more nervous than he was when I knew that all the ACOGs were going to go away. But yeah, it's pretty crazy. Like how everything rolled out and the reception. Like you said, so many changes, and usually people's are like aggressive toward changes when it's been so long. Super good feedbacks, and I appreciate everyone that tries it and actually like take the time to post criticism or actual comments about it. I read a lot of things. I don't answer often, but I read a lot of things.
Well, we'll have your Twitter down in the description. So if you want to tell him on Twitter that Jaeger needs ACOG back, that is where you do it.
Oh, no.
And don't put it in my YouTube comments anymore. Send it over to his Twitter. No, I'm joking. But yeah, we'll have your Twitter link. So anybody who wants to follow Matt on Twitter, you can go there to check that out. Thank you so much once again for coming on again. And hopefully we'll have you on again down the road at some point when you massively change all the recoils in the game, and when DMRs can deployable shields and all that fun stuff.
Well, thank you for having me back. I mean, it's so much fun. I mean, time flies by, and it's so fun to have like a connection with the community like that. It's not something that everyone can say that they have, and it's such a positive driver. Like it's easy to get like twine into like the negative feedback and everything, and just the fact to share some time with you guys after that, seeing the comments and the comments section and everything feels super nice, and it's super. I'm really thankful for that. Thank you guys.
Anytime.
To the community and to you guys. Hope you'll bring me back so I could discuss like.
Depends on what you do.
Yeah, exactly. It's all on me now. Don't worry. There's plenty of subjects that we can talk about later.
Oh,
Sure.
yes. All right. Love it. All right. Well, with that said, guys, we're going to leave you on the cliffhanger, and we're going to end the episode there. Thanks again, Matt, for joining us. Don't forget, guys, his Twitter link's down in the bio. And with that said, we will see you guys on the next one.
Ciao, guys.